past 3:30, Candace?
It is. I see Rachel's just joined us. Rachel, you're probably in the middle of this, but if you don't care, do you care to go to participants and go ahead and like, let's not have an identity crisis today. That's the last thing anybody needs at 3:30 in the afternoon. You like change your name so we all know who each other are. I'll give her just a second and then we'll go ahead and get started. Sarah, can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get cracking on this so that we can try to be timely with the time that we are afforded today. So welcome back, everybody. We're excited to see that you guys came back in the afternoon. Woo! I know we kind of questioned it for a minute. It's a little bit heavy, which we'll talk about later, but we do appreciate you guys showing up again at the end of the day. It's been a long day for everyone, so we are excited to see you guys. Today is our second session addressing curriculum support, so we're going to continue this analogy of a road trip throughout. We're just trying to reinforce this idea of planning with the end in mind as we're shifting attention to exploring the kind of thinking and planning that's necessary to help us define and identify proficiency indicators. So you guys know, based upon the work that we asked you to prepare for today or just bring with you today, that we'll be thinking about proficiency indicators. So this screen is an old girl for everybody. We'll have some instructions in a minute. We've already talked about renaming yourself. We know how to use chat, and then double clicking is just going to take you in and out of the windows if you do need to toggle back and forth. Again, Sarah and I are here to facilitate this group for you guys today, to offer you any kind of support. And then again, that QR code's there if you happen to be on a mobile device. All right, so we've already played around with our names just a little bit. If you guys don't care, can you put like just the number or numbers before your name to indicate the grade or grades that you teach? So like, I know Amy has 6th grade, so like Amy would have like 6 Amy or Amy Brown, whichever's easier. And then like, I don't know, Lori, if you're blessed enough to have like one class, one grade that you teach. No, okay. It's like immediately that appeared. You had that locked and loaded, I think. No. And that'll just kind of give us an idea, because we looked at the feedback last time and some of you guys had indicated would have been nice to have some folks. So we can't really control the curriculum or the grade, but at least this lets us know if there's someone within this group that we can kind of reach out to. So thank you guys for that. So, all right, we're on a road trip. We're not. We're all sitting at our desk right now. So a desk somewhere, but like in your mind. Or someplace else probably. So think about this road trip analogy as we look at this question here. You guys comment in chat if you haven't already. So what makes a road trip successful? I think it's pretty obvious, but there's like no right answer to this. Except for Lori's.
Oh, okay, yes. Yep.
Yes, girl.
On point, as they say.
I was thinking this through, Lori, like before we did this, and no kidding, immediately that was my first. I was like, I don't know what else you say. Like, what are you going to eat? When are you going to eat? My whole day is built around that.
Yes, knowing the destination, Amy, the quickest way, arriving safely, absolutely. Nobody gets hurt. We're all happier. We're thankful.
I know, with the exception of John, we're a bunch of ladies in here, but I feel like if we had any dads in here, they'd be like getting where we're going. Like, that's the only thing that matters, like I said, every dad ever. So if you need to continue with that, you can. But in any case, we just kind of want to frame, even if we're being a little bit lighthearted at the beginning, we just want to frame our understanding with, again, knowing how we're going to measure success. Again, when we talk later about those proficiency indicators. So once again, this slide is no new news to us, but we'll kind of review it a little bit. So real life, we're taking what we know about best practice in literacy and what we're learning about personalized learning. When we blend those two together, we want to see what kind of results do we have so far as student yield, student outcomes. And so our purpose within this collaborative is what you see here. We want to have really just the opportunity to work with each other, to lean on each other, network. Sarah will talk a little bit with us a little bit later about that collective teacher efficacy and how important it is. Like, I know it's kind of a buzzword, but like, it's going to sound touchy-feely, but like, we really do need each other. Like, I don't just mean for like the psychological venting of it, but like, we need to lean on each other, and we can and we should, and we hope to give you guys a platform for that today. So you see our timeline here. This is where we are. We have some upcoming meetings, which I'll go over with you guys at the end of this session. But in general, this is what our objectives are. We want to be thinking about that UBD, the planning process, and evaluating its impact. Like I know I have a couple of lead teachers in this group, and I've had this conversation with you guys about the kind of reflections that you guys have been having in your own planning and hopefully with your teammates as well. We want to be thinking about how to sustain that within our buildings. Like it's so amazing that you guys have the opportunity to learn and grow. How do we spread that reach throughout our building? And how do we make sure that we're keeping our eye on the prize, which is that student proficiency, and how we're connecting it to like what we're actually doing in the class. So that is like what we're doing well, how we know, and maybe even how we can duplicate it throughout our building or even throughout our district, as the case may be. I'll go ahead and pop these stages up here for you guys. So this is our agenda, our itinerary, what we'll do today. We're going to review that practice that we talked about last time. We're going to start, Sarah will share this with us, we're going to start a template so that we're going to be able to organize how we know what worked. What did we define as success for the kids? And then backpedal, how do we know that worked? Again, so that we can kind of reflect on it, refine it, but also duplicate it if we need to. We'll be thinking about those proficiency indicators with regard to kids, as well as how our instructor, what are we doing in the class that's making that magic happen? So you guys chose the AP course for your affinity groups curriculum support. We wish, like our greatest grievance here is that like we don't have some kind of like little something to give you guys like candy or something like we would in person, because this is work. Like we're all here for this time together, but you know, it's in the afternoon after everybody's work. So thanks again for being here. So before we get like super serious and do some heavy cognitive lifting, we'll get a little bit silly and we'll kind of calibrate before we hit the road. So early in the chat, you guys indicated how you define a good or successful road trip. So that definition of success, along with our own mindsets or perception, greatly impact our experiences and our likelihood of success. If I know what success looks like, I know what I'm moving towards. So for us, the planning process and our definition of success or student proficiencies. So as we're preparing for the agenda items that we just looked at a minute ago, we can be thinking about these stages where we experience in an actual road trip. Like I feel like I've lost half the group here. If you've like noticed like Brittany like on the screen, like not Brittany or our Brittany, but like actual Brittany on the screen. I know I see some looks like as I'm scrolling through like our camera roll here. But we're thinking about these 6 memes. Again, we're just trying to be lighthearted a little bit at the beginning. So you guys select one that best represents your current experience in this team planning process. And you can just drop that in chat. I was going to have a poll, but polls features being a little sticky today. And so if you're thinking like, I'm looking at Lucy and Ethel here, if you're like, I can do this. If I have a good partner, someone that vibes with me and someone that I can talk honestly and openly with, like, yeah, we can probably make this thing happen. And if that is you in your building, like marry that unicorn. So it's an amazing thing whenever that happens, truly. Some of us might be in mean too here. Maybe it's not going so very well. I'll let you guys think about this for a minute. Can you guys see this screen okay? This buckle up? Yeah. Okay.
Well, and just to add to that, a lot of times too, we recognize that you might want to reflect on where you're at, and also it might be separate for where your team's at or your experience with trying to share this with your team and their response. Because I tend to be a 6 by nature, but then as I am presenting to things in the past, in my educational experience, I tend to feel like I am number 3. Even though I start out as a number 6, I gravitate quickly to a number 3 because I have not really thought much about my team's feelings about it necessarily going into it. So that's why I end up looking like poor Brittany over here. Yes, Amy, Amy, I think the same as my daughter does this all the time to say same. I think the same. 5. Yes. Leslie, number 4. Yes. 10 minutes into the road trip. Exactly. Before then we turn around and have to go back into the house typically too.
I see Lori, she indicated 5 on this. I feel like Lori, this was nice that we had like straight lines, but I feel like it should be like this crazy clover leaf, like some kind of, I'm not sure what exactly is clear. It should be. Yeah. honest, Rachel. All right, so like we said, we just wanted to give you guys just the opportunity to kind of, yeah, be a little bit lighthearted, but also kind of think about where you are in relation to maybe that possibility of sustaining this in your building. And like, really, to be fair about it, Sarah and I thought about this. That's a pretty big ask, truthfully. Like, take all this wonderful knowledge and just like, I don't know, make magic happen throughout your building. That's easier said than done, but you guys are definitely doing the work today by trying to get yourselves prepared. And this is a very, I mean, we know most of the people in this group, this is a solid group too that we can lean on. Well, whichever you selected that best represents where you are in this planning process, remember that there is a destination. Like, this trip will come to an end, right? And that destination shapes our experiences along the way. We also get to choose those mindsets, like we mentioned earlier. So we ultimately want to place value on that trip based on how we decide to judge it up front. That is how we define that success. And then Sarah will talk a little bit more with us about that.
I feel like we're getting ready to prepare for yoga with this quote. Okay, so we're going to go Zen here for a second. We're going to breathe deeply and really think about this. And again, that's a big ask at 3:30. But what we really want to do, and I love this quote, Michael Melcher, he was in the Educational Leadership magazine last summer talking about turning over the mental soil of our work, helps identify core values, and prepares us to plant new meaningful goals. And guys, just to be quite frank, this year probably matters more than most because we're sticking our toes into the water and testing the temperature and getting used to what we're getting used to. But in a lot of cases too, it's helping us, whether we're taking time to think about those things that are working or not, because there's so many other factors going on, it's hard to really pause the world to take a check-in. So, you know, before we get left in the dust here, we want to take a minute to think about what we talked about last time and kind of walk through some deep diving in our own experiences with that when we took that back to our grade level, or whether we experienced it on our own and tried to apply it to our own planning or the teaching and learning cycle that we manage ourselves in our own classroom. Either way, so there's value in reflecting on however you experienced or played around with this model that we talked about last time. So for this first part, we want to take just a minute. We're going to give you about a minute of private think time. And if you have a pen or pencil, something to jot some ideas down, go ahead and feel free to do that in response to this question. What have you found about this process to be helpful for you and your team? Again, we're thinking about progress here, not perfection. At this point, we don't even want to acknowledge perfection. It doesn't exist yet. So how has this been helpful for you in regards to your students, like for your colleagues, any feedback you've gotten for you professionally, personally, with regards to teaching, planning, making life easier, making it more complicated at first, but then how that has impacted your instructional practice in your classroom or your understanding of what, component of your curriculum, for example. We are going to give space to have value to what had value to you. So if you will take about 30 seconds at this point to reflect on that backwards design process from last time. All right, Candace, if we'll move to the next screen.
Sarah, would you like me to walk them through this?
Yes, if you don't care, that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem. All right, guys, so we're just thinking about the reflection that Sarah asked us to complete just a moment ago. We're taking a look at this triangle, square, circle reflection protocol. And this is something that we could easily adapt for our kids. And that's part of the reason we put this in here. We just wanted to give you some little teacher ninja tricks along the way. But for us, what we're thinking about, we're reflecting on the planning process. And again, like she mentioned, what's been helpful or impactful for you, your teams, and your students. And so, like, moment of realness, like maybe it's been aspects of it have been beneficial for you. Maybe like we're not quite to that step where we are having that reach throughout the building or throughout your district. So, it might be a little bit more localized, and you might be thinking about how this has impacted you. I mean, truthfully, if you're like, this has confused me terribly, like that would be a fair enough reflection as well. So this protocol itself, like on your paper, you would do each of these. So you would like just physically like draw out a triangle, and next to it, you're thinking about 3 important points about the planning process and your adaptation. So as I'm thinking about like from the coaching aspect, like I know I've talked to a couple of leads and they're like, well, I'm thinking about that end task and I'm wondering what that looks like. So it's that kind of reflection maybe. So 3 points that have kind of stuck to you. I know Amy has mentioned that too about the importance of thinking about the end in mind, and maybe that gives us a little bit of stamina and momentum. For 2, the square, you'll just draw a square next to that triangle, and you write down anything that squares with your thinking. So just something that you agree with. And then 3, the circle. You're just going to draw a circle next to it, inside of it, whatever. And you're just going to write down anything that's still circling in your head. So questions that you want to revisit later. So if you are moving through these 3 notes here, you've got 3 things that stand out to you. 1 thing that you're like, yep, that resonates with me. And for the circle, 1 thing that you're like, that's all cool, but I'm still wondering about fill in the blank. And then I'll give you like just a minute or so to kind of write that down, scribble that down on a piece of scrap paper, and then we might share out 1 or 2 of them.
Private think time is the hardest to wait. It's the hardest to wait.
It is, and we probably still have about 20 seconds or so. I'm just going to drop something in chat just as an example here. And then if you guys don't mind, would you select just one of those that you want to share out? Either the 1, 2, 3, the triangle, square, circle. And the reason is just, again, so that we can kind of be revisiting what we said our goals were at the beginning, or we can kind of build that community. Like if I see that Amy is saying something that kind of resonates with me, then like mentally I might be like, I need to contact Amy later, or maybe just even within this session. So again, if you guys don't mind, take a look at what you've got for triangle, square, circle on your paper. And leave us something in chat, or you can unmute if you'd like, if you prefer. It's a small group.
I feel like it's hard to think about. The thing that I'm going to put in here is the thing I'm constantly thinking about as a coach is how can I honor and support adult learning that also supports student outcomes, because it's like you want, if you're going to work with folks, you don't want to work with them on a million different things. What's something that I can help them do together that's going to really leverage adult learning? I'm saying this too from a personal experience. I've noticed that a lot of districts, and you may be in a district that's in this situation, where due to funds or what have you, we lost a director of professional development. So it's not only just a question I have for myself, but how is the district going to sustain the importance of adult learning if we don't have a director of professional development? So that's just something I always am rolling around with.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you all for your comments in the chat. I'm running through those right now, looking at those. And yeah, I see that too. I feel like if I were a participant completing this activity, I would probably be drawn to circle. Like, that's great, but these are the things that I'm still wondering about. Thank you guys for dropping that in there. Take a look at the other participants' comments if you haven't already, just to kind of see, just to know that you're not alone in this, truthfully, if nothing else. But also, this is...
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Candace.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is something Sarah and I will revisit later when we check out the transcript so that we can see what kind of needs that there still are for any kind of future support that you guys might be appreciative of. So thank you guys for dropping that in. And then Sarah, did you want to wrap this up with a comment?
Well, yes, I just wanted to say I love, Amy, for you taking a risk with your comment about what if students still aren't proficient after this process. And again, I think it's a mindset shift. It's like, again, there's another mindset shift, but with high quality curriculum materials, there is, because this year is a year of learning for you all. And this process can be as simple as implementing the product, or it can be as complicated as making all kinds of changes and not really collecting the pathway that we walk to know how to better what we did this year with what we do next year. And so I think it's totally part of this process to identify when kids aren't proficient. And it's not like, I feel like, and again, I don't know if you ever feel like, you know that game Whack-A-Mole where people are whacking the little thing that pops its head up? We tend to want to do that when it comes to student performance or lack of proficiency. And really, that just might be indicators of where either me as a teacher, I need to do some learning about what kind of instructional practice in these materials is going to support that, or also being able to reflect back on what instructional path did I walk where I left out maybe an activity, not knowing, because who has, I mean, we have to manage this time, right? It's like, again, that honoring of our time. You know, if we're not being directed to look at how the activities align to the standards, unintentionally, we could have left out an activity that could have been directly correlated to some kind of feature of proficiency. And so, again, that's part of that management of adult learning, is allowing things like lack of proficiency to not be a problem, but to be an aha. It's sort of that mindset shift, if that makes sense. So I appreciate that comment, because I was like, what happens if it's like if the button's somebody's gonna press a button, I'm gonna fall through the floor. So again, knowing that we're training the trainers here, we have the materials organized on a materials list for you. And I think Candace is gonna drop this in to the chat for you to copy this link. You're gonna have access to all of the support materials for the pre-unit work or the weekly in the unit while you're in the unit work, where you're unpacking the cognitive load of the task. And that's what the UBD planning support materials are. It has the research, the templates we used, the slide deck from our session last time, as well as a blank template for you to make a copy of and change it up, use it, delete it, whatever. Today, we are leaning heavily on the Achieve the Core EQUIP protocol for student work analysis. We have made adaptations. So we wanted you to know where this came from. It's not like we invented this process or even the questions that align to the activities. We did change some of the wording of a couple of the questions. Also, Candace, there are some 6th, 7th, and 8th grade UBD planning exemplars that she has filled out for using Amplify. So it, you know, and even if you have Pearson or another curriculum program, you can take a look at it. It just kind of gives you an idea of what, if you were to do the UBD template with your team, if it helped them to understand what it could look like, you could easily show these exemplars to them to get an idea. So we wanted you to have access to those. We also have this slide deck, the bit.ly for this slide deck, as well as the template that you all will be using today. Did everybody get a chance? If you don't care, you can just put your thumb up and let me know, preferably your thumb, up, and let me know that you got that material list, because that's kind of an essential piece. Awesome. Oh, there's Christy. Okay. So again, guys, even though we're at the end of, technically we have our student work with us, so we are at the destination. But we're still, you know, it's a cycle, and cycles theoretically never end. So teaching and learning never ends. I hope that that is exciting to your spirit. Sometimes that can feel heavy, right? So this idea is still the same. We are going to determine acceptable evidence today. We are going to identify in the student work desired results, and we're going to plan for experiences and instruction and harvest experiences and instructions our students had based off the evidence in front of us. So what was a high level practice that we might be able to reflect on that we know is what we're seeing because we taught it this way. That's what I want us to definitely look at for evidence of in our student work today, because that's going to help us scope and scale practices that will lead to mastery of standards for 10 Ready, and help us also understand what those activities and materials are in our curriculum and how they relate to that to some degree, because again, you're managing adult learning and student learning is all happening at the same time here. So this is where we are going to take about 15 minutes, and we're not going to do breakout rooms because it's a lot to manage on your screen. We're going to take 15 minutes to work through this exercise. You're going to click on the student work template that Candace drops in the chat, and that's going to be your template. We're going to focus on stage 2. You have access to stage 3, but that's going to come next. I'd like for you also to have access to your student examples. So if you have your screen up, you'll have the document that you're going to use to think through your student work samples, and in front of you, you might actually have your student work, or maybe on your computer screen, you might have your student work as well. I want to run through the first 4 questions of this tool to see if you have any questions about what we're asking you to kind of jot down. There are no right or wrong answers. In truth, this is about the work that you brought and thinking through this process. So the first question is, what does the student work, Candace, are you working on?
Yeah, I think they need access to that. I think that's your document, but I'm going to try to open it up for everyone. If you don't care to just give me just a minute.
It's a public link. It should be.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
It's okay. I was just going to say the first one, and we tried to put some examples in parentheses of what we're talking about, but it's certainly not limited to those things in the parentheses. So the first one is, what does the student's work demonstrate about what they know about the task? So, what work is in there that's connected to the knowledge building, the thinking that you identified? Part of the task that they answered, evidence of knowledge you built. The last question, or the second question, is, what does this student's work demonstrate about their proficiency with the requirements of 10 Ready? And so there's kind of 2 layers to this. There's the, what does it actually physically look like? What physically, when we look at it, makes us know that this is proficient? They are using commas correctly. They're using, obviously, grammar and punctuation is important. But then we want to also dig deeper, because a lot of times we might find that we may have a phrase without correct punctuation that houses a nugget of knowledge that kid is letting us know that they listened to that discussion we had. And even though they can't tell it to us in correct grammar, that's going to have some value. You're going to want to read on the surface level. You're also going to want to dig deeper into the work itself to see if, even though it may not be a complete sentence, we don't want to discredit the student's thinking behind what they've written. And features that align to the 10 Ready standards. You might be able to find an example of that, and then maybe you have understanding of that standard that you want to jot down. This is clearly this standard, and there's evidence of that you taught. What does the student's work demonstrate about the depth of understanding and reasoning ability? If you have examples of proficient student work in front of you, and you have a child that has typically not been proficient, you definitely want to call out the fact that this piece of writing is helping them understand how to use the vocabulary that we're building in the classroom in a way that they've never been able to do that before. And so you can give space to that actual, their ability to reason through the task. what vocabulary, phrasing related to the knowledge they have built over the week. I know a lot of times if there's an argumentative component to what they're writing about, or an opinion piece to some degree with the quick write, if it's a quick write, you might have had a certain heated conversation, and there might be some key vocabulary words that kids, you had an expectations for kids to use, and that might be where you pay tribute to that evidence there. And then lastly, this one is again, and I go back to Amy's comment. Amy, I hope it's okay that I keep saying your name. You're probably like, please stop saying my name. But I do appreciate what Amy wrote in the chat about the lack of proficiency in this case. And again, this is where we have to be risk takers and eliminate this idea that, you know, it's not okay to be honest. I think that's exactly how we get better. It's this idea of what evidence in their work aligns to the instructional work and or activities and materials that you spent the most time on leading up to this activity. And I disappeared into the grass. My whole body did. There it is. Okay. So again, this is kind of where you don't have, you're not, we won't have any, we won't be able to see your copy of this. Is this the one that has the make a copy, Candace?
It is.
Okay. So we won't be able to see your comments here. It's for your eyes only, truly. Now, when you do this in a team setting, you will definitely want someone to be the recorder, and you can do this together. But today, for today's purpose and for our experience, we want to give you time and space to experience that. And again, take a risk, be honest. No judgment here. I taught Amplify a couple of years ago for the first time ever. And I can tell you right now that a lot of times what I spent the most time on was building background knowledge, and I would never see evidence in student work because my background knowledge never aligned to what the task wanted it to, you know, it was never related to what they needed to know. So I quickly learned that I had to give up doing that, even though it was something I did previously. So this is where a lot of times we're just being reflective on our, I call it an ROI, our return on our instructional investment. What have you spent instructionally the most time on, and what evidence are you finding in their work? And if it's easier here, sometimes I list what I already know I spent the most time on here, and then I come back and might highlight what I really feel like was a high leverage practice there. Are there any questions about those 4 things that you're going to be looking through? And I would take it one student at a time. If you want to go ahead and give your kids some anonymity, you can just assign each piece that you brought a number and look at one student's work at a time. That's why we're giving you 15 minutes. We feel like that way you can really kind of take a deep dive. And if you just get one done, that's totally fine too. So having said all of that, that was a lot. Do you have any questions?
I have a question, Sarah.
Yes.
Like, just gonna jump right in there, like in front of everybody. As I'm working, like as a participant, as a teacher, as I'm working through this, and I'm looking at this first one, what does the students' work demonstrate about what they know? Like, holy guacamole, like, especially if it's a 5-paragraph essay, like a lot, I hope. But probably what I need to do to kind of narrow my focus is I'm thinking, like, if I, like this week, this day, whatever, I spent a lot of time talking about how to craft an articulate thesis, then that is what my focus is, or am I all over the place?
No, that's perfect. Okay. So it might be the structure of that particular sentence that you're focusing on, the contents of that sentence related to the knowledge they're building, or the context that they're having to learn about that structure of a thesis.
Okay.
So not only the structure, but also the comprehension behind what they have stated in their own personal thesis statement that you're looking for. Does that make sense? So yeah, that's a great example. So I'm not just necessarily looking for evidence just of the task itself, but possibly the structure of the writing based off what kind of writing the task is asking them to participate in. And if you know that you taught thesis statement a lot, then I would absolutely get on that and be focused on how did they do their thesis statement? Not only how did they do it, how did they structure it, and was that structured echoed in the rest of the essay? If that makes sense. Did that answer your question?
It does, thanks. And I left a question for you guys in chat too. If you do want to see any examples, if you'll let me know, I'll just kind of change screens. If not, that's fine too.
All right. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start the 15 minutes, which means we're going to hush. But here's what I'm going to say. We're not going anywhere. And I'm going to have to mute myself so I don't talk, because that's just the kind of person I am. And I don't have chocolate to put in my mouth either. So that's bad. So I'm going to be right here. And if there's any questions, you can private message me or Candace and or the whole group. Either way, you should feel comfortable. We're all part of the team here in my mind. So if there's, I think most people have questions and it's totally normal. But as you're moving through this, what questions do you have? Please feel free to send us a question in chat or privately message us, and we will be happy to respond. But we're going to go ahead and get that timer started. Candace may be copying this to remind herself what the prompt is, which is totally fine, but don't hesitate, because this is what we're looking for, actual evidence in the student's work. So you might say something like, you might just, if you have a digital copy of your kids' work there, you might just copy and paste their actual language into that box and then put just a note as to why, if that helps you, or just copy and post their language that makes you connect to that question. Like I might even put in that last column, modeled, finding strong evidence to justify thesis, 2 days in a row for 45 minutes, provided feedback related to their evidence strength in discussion. Just to know from that instructional investment, for example.
Do you care to repeat that, Sarah?
Yeah, like just, in identifying strong evidence to support the thesis. I might put, taught 2 days in a row, modeled 2 days in a row for 30 minutes. And then you might even put, had kids resubmit their thesis statement based off of my feedback.
Wow.
Just because if I don't physically see the instructional or reflect on the actual time frame, I won't know what portion of the block actually.
I've got about 10 minutes left, Sarah. Does that sound right?
All right, kind of based off of our time, and again, we had dreams of getting you all out of here uber early. So we're going to go ahead and kind of stop where you are right here, just for the experience of getting into the document. And now that you have the document and know kind of what we're talking about, I want us to move to the last part of the planning tool so that we can kind of get to this sense of like what proficiency, this picture of proficiency. Because again, I guarantee you that if you had 4 team members or across your district, if you were able to create a team of just 7th grade ELA teachers, and you all brought your examples of proficiency together, I guarantee you there's going to be some slight differences in interpretation. And it helps to kind of think about in a school that has, if there's more than one of you that's teaching 7th grade, it's very helpful to have a partner in crime to kind of build this knowledge with, because that interpretation helps both of you grow. So we're going to move now to stage 3. And it's going to be harder to do stage 3 because we've not been able to give this stage its full amount of time to develop. But stage 3 is kind of where the magic sauce is for this process.
Sarah, before we get to this really important slide on this effect size, I just wanted to let you guys know I'm going to go ahead and drop a forced copy version of the one that you see on the screen right here. Like if you want that as an example, please, like honestly, this is not like primo promo example, but if you feel like you need it or you just want like a reference point, like if you're that kid that you're like, you went to math class and you know you did that, but when you went home to do your math homework, you were like, was this even the same thing we did today? Like if that's what this is kind of feeling like, you can use this as an example if you want. But in any case, we'll go back. Sarah, can you let me know, do you guys still see stage
Yes,
2?
I still see, yes, and now we're on research. We're not going to actually participate in this activity, but as a teacher leader, you might be redelivering this process. We wanted you to know this is the research and effect size data that we're pulling these materials from, this process from, and we really are truly trying to align it to the highest leveraging correlation to student achievement that we can find. This is not, we're not making this up. This is something that has been researched heavily. Here's collective teacher efficacy at the top of that. And you can see it's correlated to 1.57 effect size and student outcomes. And remember, keep in mind, 0.4 is reflective of 1 year's growth in effect size. So we've got collective teacher efficacy, and you'll notice from last week, that was one of the connections we made, but also cognitive task analysis, and it correlates to 1.29 effect size of student outcome improvement. We wanted you to also notice that reflection is high, 0.75, but there are lots of connections to student work analysis that can be made here. We just don't have time to do that. But we wanted you to have access and understand what the purpose of this slide was. So lastly, in this stage, what you're going to be doing is, and again, you may not have had time to do more than one student, which is totally fine. What we would want you to do is, once you've completed the 3 student, looking at 3 students' work, is what patterns are you noticing in the students' work? And reflect on suggestions and ideas related to your teaching and instructional time that led those students to develop the proficiency you've identified. So what student work features identify that proficiency? What's the thinking? Not just, again, the physical, like what we see, like, are they using correct grammar skills that we focused on? We're going to have to dig deeper into that mud. What's actually there? Is it making sense, even though it might be an incomplete sentence? We're not going to judge, at first we will definitely include that in part of the feedback related to grammar. But at this point, what we're also looking for is evidence of their thinking and the purpose. So, at the very end, what we would ultimately have teachers do, or teams of teachers do in the same grade level, is then look collectively at the student work that you have in place, that you brought that day, and identify from that a solid student exemplar, so that next year, when you and your team come back to this week of work, you have an anchor paper prepared that you can share if you have a new teammate, or you can look at and refer to in terms of what you know about what got you there. And that's part of the work of new materials, is developing that picture of what proficiency looks like for students, but also understanding it backwards. What does that mean for me instructionally? What did I do to get them there, to see that evidence? So that's the next part of the work that we're going to have you jump into. We're going to give you about 5 minutes, which is significantly chopped. We were going to give you 15 minutes solid for both activities, but because of our time constraints, and we don't want to hold you over since you all came back, oh my goodness, we want to make sure that you come back the next time we have a session. We wanted to get you out of here early. So if you will, take the next 5 minutes at most to kind of see if there's things that you can jot down here that you're already thinking about. And again, I'm going to have to mute myself so that I stop talking. So I'm going to do that right now. I will say too that this last column, if you kind of feel like, even though we didn't get to do all 3 student pieces of work, you probably didn't have time to do that, You might be able to take some of what you did in the first stage and look at that last box, what student work features identify proficiency. That might be something you already kind of have a good sense of going in. Essentially, what you would do here is just make a list of those features. And again, when you find an exemplar, you can just use what you've listed here to be descriptors of what made this exemplar an exemplar. Which is helpful, especially when you have kids that you're trying to get to that place that even after modeling still are struggling. You can give them this sample next year to kind of think about when they move into theirs or read and talk about. So again, what you might want to do is move down to that last box that talks about student work, like what student work features identify proficiency with this task that you're using. And again, you might know some of those off the top of your head, but some of those things might be things that just were a result of your instructional practice. Like Candace was saying, a well-constructed thesis. Or you might have talked a lot about transitional words as you were talking about constructing the essay itself. And you might say, you know, two transition words identifying, you know, counter argument, strong counterclaim, paragraph, or introductory sentence to the counterclaim. Those are the kinds of things that you would want to add here. Especially too, if you talked about phrases or syntactical variety, those are some things that you might put here because you feel like that's something kids are starting to be held accountable for more and more. Is that syntax, you know, the variety that they're using to explain their ideas. Or maybe it was elaboration. A lot of what we talked about last time with task analysis too was synonyms and antonyms. And some of those may or may not have been, you may or may not have used those, may or may not have used those in like had a word wall or had some kind of way to collect that evidence. You might even put in your student work features that they utilized words that were synonyms to prompt words to communicate to you that they were to answer the prompt and had paid attention to a class discussion you had possibly about that. So those are some things that you could add to there. All right, so I hate that we have to cut this short just because of our time and again, trying to honor that. Part of what's difficult is we're trying to teach you this process as well as have that experience of planning. And so we're gonna need a hitch here. We're gonna need some help avoiding road trip quagmire. You know, this is one of my favorite, it's a book called Teaching with Fire. And I absolutely can't say enough about the work that you're doing and how much respect that we have here at the Niswonger Foundation for all that hard work. And, you know, Marge Piercy wrote a long poem, and this is just one stanza from that poem, but it really stuck out to me. And I love the picture that Candace pulled, showing the car in the mud, because that's how it feels. But I'm just going to read it out loud because I do think it's powerful. I love people who harness themselves an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward. Who do what has to be done again and again. And I really, in terms of teaching, I most identify with those last two Well, the last phrase again and again. And what we know this year is that we have new materials. What we knew last year is gone. And part of what makes what we do feel like we need a hitch is we know what it takes for us to understand what we have to teach. And the work sometimes is such a heavy lift that it does help magnify our impact when we can lean on each other as adults to support and sustain our knowledge that we need to be successful. And for a lot of us, when we get new materials, it's hard to have that, well, I know how to teach this, but now I've got this new material and this new material doesn't. And that's easy to build up that wall. But what we also know is that when we can break down that wall and dig into the work and get into the mud, the payoff for ourselves as a learner is also reflected in what our students are able to know and do. And that's part of what makes it so mundane, is making the old new again, doing what we know made us a level 5 teacher and continually going back and starting out as a learner at the beginning of the year and developing that sense of what we have to continually do to fill up our bucket with the understanding that's necessary to be effective teachers in this new high quality curriculum material. So that's part of why I just love this poem. If I read the whole thing, I told Candace I would cry. So I will save and spare you all of that. So again, this is a big ask in my opinion, based off the fact that you weren't fully able to engage in the time frame or probably in the work. But we hope that you were able to get in there enough and kind of think about the components of this process enough. We'd like for you to take a moment, even though your time was limited with this process, on what you're thinking about how today's learning will or could impact your instructional practice and support proficiency for you, your grade level team, your school. And yes, today we're talking about ELA, but gosh, your science and math teachers, really anybody can do this kind of work and gain knowledge from it. But just kind of taking a minute to think about what we've done today and how you believe or feel like that what we did today could or will impact your instructional practice. What could be some takeaways from this? How do you see that supporting your knowledge or your team's knowledge of proficiency or mastery, if you will? And not mastery as in advanced, but grade level. I love it. Yeah, it will help me to do more than just grade student work. Yes. Let me look for trends that are both, yes. And I kind of secretly hope that it helps us reframe this idea that there's negative. What's not there is not necessarily perceptional in terms of negativity. It might not be there because there wasn't that knowledge there, which is okay. What can we do to, it kind of is a window of opportunity. How can we use what's not there to drive what we do next to make it be there? I love that. Moving forward. Yeah. I like what Leslie, yes, Leslie, I like what you're saying there. The help us identify areas early on where we can help the specific skills and build areas of strength. Yes. Once you establish anchor papers, what I love to do is laminate them. I know this sounds cheesy, like in the old school days when we actually had kids in front of us, but I love to laminate the anchor paper work and just put it in my files that went along with that unit so that I would have something, and this was back not too long ago, 2015, where I would put it under the overhead projector and just share with kids, and that way they could use my vis-a-vis markers, which usually were all the way down my hand, to say, help me identify again what made it proficient. Yeah. Guys, I cannot tell you, I have done this in like 3 schools, and we have, like, I think of these processes that we've walked with you through in terms of my effect as a coach and in terms of the work that I've done with teachers in general. The part that makes this hard is sometimes you don't know where it's going. You can't really prep for the meetings other than prepare the blank template, which is part of the beauty of this process. But I look at these processes as the bookends of a unit work. You do the pre-unpacking, the unpacking the prompt as the first thing you encounter before you start teaching a unit. And you can use that process as you keep going. Maybe in the middle, you check back in with your team. So maybe that's out of 6 weeks, that might be a 2-time meet as a team. And then the final bookend is where you look at the student work. And that can really help. It will close gaps for sure. I know you don't have to believe me when I get it, but it's hard work, but it's worth it. I love the comments that you all have written. All right, Candace.
Sarah, this first, and the rest of us too, this first link is the hyperlink for that template email. If that's something that you choose to use, or maybe just kind of have in your back pocket if you don't feel like your group is quite ready for it just yet. So that first link I just dropped is for the template. And again, you guys have access to this stuff if you go to the main website itself. I was just trying to give it to you right now. And then the second one is this Rural Life Professional Learning resource, if you'd like to have that as well.
And when you all fill out the evaluation today, we really take that to heart. We would love to know any other kinds of supports related to the work that you're doing right now, related to what we've talked about specifically. If there was something that we could provide you that would make this more clear or give you another opportunity to think about it before you use it, or if there's something we can personally do, anything like that in the feedback is going to be helpful, and we will take to heart, because I know this is difficult work. And it does lead to big payoffs, but it can be intimidating. So we appreciate you all. I seriously, I told Candace, I'm like, they're here. People that we know that were here last time came back. Yay. We really appreciate the fact that you have sat through this with us today and are so thankful for your support and your participation. And we learned a lot from you. So it helps us to refine the process.
Yes, thank you all. Like, I know we have kind of like said it about 100 times now, but we really do mean it. Like, this was not maybe as obvious as like these 6 cool tech toys that you can implement, or tech tools that you can implement tomorrow. Like, that certainly has value as well. Like, this was like really like the foundational cognitive work. So, and y'all did it at like 3:30 in the afternoon. So,
well, and to keep in mind too, the manageability of it, what I like to think about, to calm my anxiety about this process is, if you do 4 units, for example, in your new curriculum, and you think about these processes or protocols as bookends to a unit, you're really only talking about 8 team meetings a year, which sounds like a big number, but it's a lot more manageable when you think about it like that, because a unit can take up to 8 to 9 weeks. So that would only mean 2 very directed team meetings. And even if you just started there, you could add more eventually, but using it just as unit bookends, this process of the pre and the post with the student work will absolutely close gaps in unbelievable ways in your school and in your grade level. So like we said, if there's anything we can do to help support this practice for you as teacher leaders, that's what we're here for. Obviously, your coaches that your schools will be able to provide support as well, but feel free to email us and ask for whatever we've got. I think Candace and I both, I think, are going to kind of start doing some more of this, but we've been kind of thinking about videotaping ourselves in a team session. So that might be something that we could add to that to give you all an idea of what that would look like in a team meeting. I hate hearing myself when I get videoed, and for some reason I sound intentionally like more country. I don't know what that's about, but.
All right, guys, I think John has dropped that survey in there for us. So yeah, I don't know if I misspelled your name. Sorry, Sarah. If you guys need to hang out for just a few minutes, if you want to, if there's any kind of question or anything that you need to talk about further with either of us, you feel free to do that. If you're like, nope, 4:30, got things going on, then you feel free to log off as well. And we will see you guys the next time we have the opportunity to work together. Thank you guys so very much.
Thank you so much. And good luck. Have a good rest of the week. It's almost Friday.